you look at India's economic exposure to Turkey and Azerbaijan, it's quite limited. In fact, if you look at the exports that we have done so far in FY25 till February to Turkey, it's close to $5.2 billion US, which is just 1.5% of the total exports that India is doing. With Azerbaijan, it was as low as $86.1 million US. When it comes to imports from Turkey, it was around 2.8 billion, and from Azerbaijan, it was around 1.9 million US. So very limited exposure and trade surplus with both the countries. Now, if you look at the tourism data, now here's where the major impact could come in for both the countries, that is Turkey and Azerbaijan. For Azerbaijan in 2024, nearly 2.4 lakh Indians visited the country, and Azerbaijan's tourism board was expecting the growth to be around 11% for the next 10 years. So there is where the hit can come in. For Turkey, around 3.3 lakh Indian citizens visited the country in 2024, and the average spend was around $1,200 to $1,500. So on an average, around 4,300 crore rupees was spent by Indian tourists in Turkey in 2024, and that's where the hit could come in. And for Turkey, it is more important given the fact that tourism is one of the key contributors to the GDP. Nearly 12% of the GDP number was coming in from the tourism sector. Now let's look at the companies that have exposure to Turkey and Azerbaijan. But do remember, this is not an exhaustive list. We have tried to compile as many as companies that we could get who have some or the other form of exposure to Turkey and Azerbaijan. When it comes to Jubilant Food, this is the only company which has the biggest exposure to Turkey and Azerbaijan, because they had acquired this DP Eurasia company back in 2024 for around 1,440 crore rupees. Now this company has an exclusive master franchise of Domino's Pizza in Turkey, Azerbaijan and Georgia. Now this business, this segment contributed nearly 23% to the top line and 25% to the consolidated EBITDA of the company in FY25. When it comes to Indigo, it seems like Indigo might have a bigger exposure given the fact that they have a code share agreement with Turkish Airlines. But if you look at the seats deployed or the capacity deployed by Indigo towards Turkey or Azerbaijan, it's very low. The seat and capacity growth was at 5% for the Turkey country. But if you look at the seats that they have deployed overall, compared to the total number of seats that they have, is just 0.5%. For capacity deployed, it's just 2% of the total capacity has been deployed to Turkey. And when it comes to Azerbaijan, the number is very less. The seats deployed is just 0.1% and capacity deployed is just 0.2% of the total capacity that Indigo has. Moving on to some two-wheeler companies or the auto companies. Now, if you look at the auto companies, multiple companies have exposure to Azerbaijan and Turkey, but none of them have more than 5% exposure to both these countries. Mahindra and Mahindra, Bajaj Auto, Hero Moto, TVS Motor have operations in Turkey. M&M has an R&D and manufacturing facility of tractors. But if you look at the number of units that they're selling in a year in Turkey is less than what they sell in a month in India. Two-wheeler companies like Bajaj Auto, Hero Motor and TVS have sales offices in both these countries, that is Turkey and Azerbaijan. When it comes to Dabur, now they have exposure to Turkey because of the acquisition that they had done back in 2010. It's the company is called Hobby Cosmetic, and the exposure to the top line from this company comes to around just 3 to 4%. Polyplex is another company which has a significant exposure. They have a Turkish plant which contributes to the international businesses of the company, and that contributes around 5 to 6% to the top line of the company. Polyplex market cap of this company is close to 3,500 crore rupees. Apart from that, there are some bigger companies, but again, the exposure of these companies is less than 5%, could be around 2 to 3% as well. There are companies like Dr. Reddy's, Sun Pharma, Reliance, UPL. They sell a lot of chemicals. IOCL, they buy some crude from Azerbaijan, and then there is TD Power, which also has some exposure to either Turkey or Azerbaijan. But then again, the exposure is not more than 5%, and this is not an exhaustive list of companies that have an exposure to Azerbaijan and Turkey.